Hi guys, Happy New Year. Welcome back to my channel. So excited to have you here today. My name is Ronka, and for those of you who are new, I love to talk about making moves both geographically and professionally. Now, speaking of professionally, the new year is a great opportunity to start over, right? For a lot of us at work, we do something called a performance review, or we have performance review cycles that run along the year. And so for some people, it might be based on a calendar year, January to December. It might be based on the fiscal year, or it might be based really on kind of however your organization defines the year. Now, I think a new year and the start of a new performance review is always a great way to reset and to make sure that you are heading towards what you want to accomplish for the year. Performance reviews are metric-oriented processes that allow your organization to assess how you're doing as an individual and also how you line up as compared to your peers, whether it's people that are on the same project as you, in the same role, in the same title, or even in the same department. Most organizations conduct the performance reviews once a year. And once again, like I mentioned, it's either a calendar year, a fiscal year, or however your organization is going to define their performance review year. And so at the start of it, you're typically meeting with a manager or a supervisor or someone to kind of set your goals, or at least look to see what the organization expects of you. And then the plan is that by the end of the year, you would be able to reflect back and see how you met any of the goals that were set for you, or any of the goals that you also set for yourself. Performance reviews typically are factored into things like pay, promotion potential. It factors into a lot of things as far as like how your progress in the organization is going to be. Now, please do keep in mind that depending on the sort of organization you work for, there will be other things that factor into your progress, right? So you also have to think in terms of how you mesh with your team or how you mesh with leadership. You want to think about timesheet compliance, specifically if you are a contractor for the federal government. You want to think about things like continuing education, depending what kind of role you're in, and so on and so forth, really as your organization defines it. So in today's video, I'm gonna be sharing some tips that I have for you for performance reviews. And I am so excited because I'm also going to be sharing a template that I created. So I created a template, and this template is simply to help you track your performance. This is something that, I created based on what we were tracking in my organization. So please feel free to tweak it to kind of fit your needs. My first tip, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. So I know I previously talked about how performance reviews start at the beginning of a year, whether it's a calendar, fiscal, or however your organization defines it. But if you come into the company in the middle of a performance review cycle, that doesn't mean they're going to wait for the cycle to end and then start you on the next one. Day one of your job, day one of the role, day one if it's a new project, that's when your performance review cycle kind of starts. And so you have to make sure that from day one, you have a good understanding of what's expected of you. Now, if you're going to a new organization, yes, you want to get through orientation first, but you really want to make it a high priority when you're getting into a new job in particular, that you have a good understanding of what the company is measuring. And, utilizing the spreadsheet that I provided is probably one of the best ways to do it. You want to make sure that if there are subcategories, you want to make sure if there are themes throughout, that you have a good grasp on that so you know what you need to be working on. My second tip for you is be smart, right? So you want to develop SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, they are measurable, they're attainable, they're relevant, and they're time bound. Specific meaning that you have to know exactly what you want to do. You can't say, I want to get a certification. Which certification do you want, right? They need to be measurable. It needs to be something that you can actually measure that you have done. So you can't say, I want to just continue to progress. You could say, I want to make sure that even if I don't get a full promotion, I'm maybe promoted to the next pay band, right? You want things that are attainable. So I would not, if I was an entry-level employee, put a goal of becoming director by the end of the year, because depending the organization you're at, that probably isn't feasible. They need to be relevant. It needs to be relevant to what you need to accomplish, what you want to accomplish, or it needs to be relevant to your career. There's no point in me, if I'm in a data analysis role, to have a professional goal of creating, some sort of graphic if it's not related to what I'm working on at all. It also needs to be time bound. I think that's where a lot of people mess up with goals, right? You sometimes set these very lofty goals that will take you a lot more time than you realize. So when you set a SMART goal and you're being specific and you're trying to make sure it's measurable and it's attainable and it's relevant, you now have to think of, based on the time that I need to set, is this going to be possible? And so the easy way to kind of think about it for performance reviews is that typically the time bound is usually that performance review cycle, right? So whether it's a year or depending, if I know for me, one of my goals at work, they're goals that we kind of have 2 years to accomplish. And so for me, I know that when I'm setting this goal, it's something that I plan on accomplishing within 2 years. A very key thing I'm going to say about SMART goals in particular, they are great to set, but please, whether it's a SMART goal, whether it's a I just kind of did it and that's kind of what I have goal, just make sure that you're flexible because things happen. I mean, last year with COVID, I know for myself, I had a professional goal of kind of networking through the organization since I was relatively new. But obviously when the shutdown happened in March, that no longer became feasible because we were no longer doing any in-person events. So I had to kind of come back with my manager and change my goals. So just make sure that you can be flexible with your goals. My third tip is to track all of your comments. As far as I'm concerned, if you don't have it recorded, it did not happen. So you need to make sure that if you're working with a client, maybe one of your teammates, someone that you report to, whoever it is, if they give you a positive comment, you need to track it. Specifically, if it is a positive comment that recognizes that you are going above and beyond or that you're doing something outside of the scope of what was tasked to you. Typically, when people are talking about promotions, they want to see that you're performing at the next level. And so if you have some anecdotal evidence that you performed at the next level, that's great for you. I also suggest that you also track negative comments. Now, when you get negative comments or criticism, sometimes, yes, it can be a little hurtful or it can deflate your ego a bit. But I think it's important to track these because if they're saying it to you, they might also be saying it to whoever you report to. And even beyond that, when you have a criticism or something that you need to work on, your next step needs to be, how do I address this? How do I make sure it never happens again? And how do I reinstill this person's trust in me, right? And so I think you also want to make sure that as you're recording the criticism, you're thinking through those things and also tracking it into your spreadsheet. Ultimately, no one is perfect. We all make mistakes. So it's really about how you make sure you don't make that mistake again. So my fourth tip to you is to use this as often as you can and use it with whoever you report to. I feel that when you use this as often as you can, it helps you to make sure that you're consistently updating it, right? So this cannot be something that you create and you only create it at the beginning of a performance review cycle and then you never bring it out until it's about to be the end of a performance review cycle. It's not going to help you. It's something that you should probably have on your desktop if possible. It's something that you need to just at least know where it is so that the second you get a comment, copy and paste, drop it in. The second that you have done something in the performance metrics or that you've mastered something in the performance metrics that are being evaluated by your organization, you can then shift yourself to the next level of how you're performing. You want to make it a habit to share this with your manager as well or whoever you're reporting to because you want them to be on the same page with you. I personally meet with my manager every other week and I send this to my manager once a month throughout the entire cycle, once a month. So when my manager and I meet, this actually helps us during our meeting. If you are working in an organization where maybe you're working across different projects and working with a variety of different people, even if you're not gonna, I wouldn't necessarily suggest sending them this spreadsheet, but do make sure that you are having regular check-ins so that you understand how they rate you or where they see you as being, if that makes sense. You don't want any surprises at performance review cycle time. Like that's the worst time possible to get a surprise as far as how someone thinks you're doing. So my final tip is to save a copy. Now, I would suggest that everyone saves a copy as far as like the professional side of things, like, in case you get a new manager or in case, down the line your role changes. I think it's good to just at least have it for your job and your company. But I also would suggest saving a copy for your own personal benefit or your own personal use, right? If you are going to save it for your own personal use, though, I would just recommend that you redact anything that can be considered as company intellectual property. You don't want any issues. So for me, I think the benefit of saving it is that it helps you to identify the various things that you did, right? So some of them might be general metrics that the company is measuring everyone on, but then you have your own specific goals that you were tracking towards. Additionally, for me, I would use that language, specifically the company metrics one. Those are some things I would use for my resume. So if it has to do with like client interaction and you know that you've done client interaction, I would take some of that language and weave it into my resume to be able to say, hey, you know what, I've excelled with client interaction. So just kind of keep those things in mind, because ultimately your performance reviews is about you progressing professionally, but your resume needs to also kind of reflect how you've progressed, or it needs to reflect that you are progressing. Performance reviews help you track how you're progressing professionally, and you want to be able to take key terms, key phrases, and pull them into your resume so that your resume can also reflect it, right? Because for most companies, depending where you're applying to or where you're trying to move to next, they may or they may not ask for your performance review, so they won't get to see the nitty-gritty. But if there are specific things that you feel speak very well to your ability and your qualifications, make sure that you can leverage what you already have that exists and that is proven. As I mentioned, I did create a spreadsheet template, and this spreadsheet template is meant to help you through the performance review cycle. The first tab tracks competencies. So these are the competencies or metrics that your company is going to assess you based on. Then I have a tab for goals. This is for defining those SMART goals that you need to define. And then the last goal is for feedback. So whether it's the positive feedback or the criticism, but I have a way for you to track it. And then specifically for the things that are negative feedback or criticism, I have a way for you to also kind of identify how you want to resolve it. So that's all I have for today. If you have any tips that you use for your performance review cycle at work, please make sure to drop it down in the comments, or let me know what you think about the tips that I've offered as well. Otherwise, please make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to my channel for future videos. See you all next time.